So, as I said, this is our final discussion, our final session for the conference. It's a forward-looking discussion about the technology revolution and how AI is going to evolve or will potentially evolve over the next 5 years in the context of our industry specifically. This discussion is going to be masterfully moderated by Dave Ruan, whom I'm sure many or all of you know. Dave is an industry veteran with over 25 years experience, and he's a huge advocate of leadership, innovation, and also knowledge sharing in the industry. You probably know him as co-founder and chair of the Process Innovation Challenge as well. And he was a member of the GALA program committee in 2018 and 2019, as well as a member of the board of directors of Translation Commons. So he does get around quite a bit. I know Dave personally, we've had the chance to work together in the past, and I find he has this unique gift to kind of identify and bring people together from many different backgrounds and kind of diverse walks of life within our industry, who share a common affinity to an important topic and can offer really insightful and diverse views about that same topic. He is also a trusted advisor to customer and contacts, and I have personally been very lucky to count Dave as a mentor for the last couple of years. So thank you for that, Dave. He is currently Digital Content and Partnership Manager at XTM International. So I'm going to hand it over to Dave, and he's going to introduce the topic in a little bit more detail and his panelists. So the floor is yours, Dave.
Muchas gracias, Maria Jesus. What an intro. Absolute pleasure to be here. And welcome to everybody, wherever you are. Welcome to our panel. AI in our industry has been around in some guise over the past 2 decades. You know, it started off as a niche, cool thing with a limited use case and even less users and advocates. We have entered the intelligence revolution, as Bernard Marr puts it. You know, it's the most powerful tool we have access to now. AI needs data and lots of it in order to learn and make smart decisions, of course. This gives us a clue as to why the intelligence revolution is happening now, because we have AI and we have lots of data. Making new AI accessible and deployable is now a basic need. It's an expectancy within companies. How has our industry reacted? Well, we're going to talk a little bit about that. Indeed, how will it react in the next 5 years? What will we be talking about at GALA 2026? Whatever it is, hopefully we'll be closer together and doing it face to face. But joining me to discuss this topic are, let me introduce our panel. Well, Julio Leal, welcome Julio, Ken Behan, Tabia Deville, and Maxim Kalilov. Welcome, panelists.
Thank you.
Hi, Dave. Thank you.
Thank you.
By the way, thank you, panelists. By the way, everybody, you will also be able to have your say in here. As Maria Jesus said, please get your questions in and we'll bring them in, more likely towards the back end. We'll also move around a bit into the discussion and give you a chance to answer some questions. So watch out for a poll or two coming your way. So where do we go from here? Shall we find out? Let's start, shall we? What does AI mean to you? Where do you see it going in the next 5 years? Maxime, shall we start with you? Where is AI now and where do you think it's going?
Oh, I believe it's a very good question. So AI in 2021, if we talk about translation localization industry, it's much more than it was even 2-3 years ago, right? It's not just machine translation, not just spell checker that we kind of got used to already, right? So now we're talking about very different and much more advanced applications of AI. So for example, many of you might know or might heard about quality estimation, right? This is a fantastic application of machine learning, artificial intelligence, which allows you to estimate the quality of produced translation without actually having access to the, let's say, human translation, right? So it's and it's not the fantasy anymore. It's something that we have in production, right? Already. So, and another one is, which I would like to highlight, is natural language generation. So hopefully we'll have time to talk about it in the end of the panel, but it's also a fantastic and I would say disruptive application of AI, which starting to gain popularity, which people are starting to look at it from a very, let's say, business-centered perspective, right? So, and if we talk about multilingual natural language generation, it's even more relevant, let's say, to the discussions, right? So, because in theory, at least, this is a technology that can replace translation, right? So, yeah, my point is that actually 2021 is an exciting and very, maybe the most interesting moment in history of AI in application to the translation localization industry.
Wonderful. Thank you, Maxime. Look forward to hearing more about that and getting into the examples around that whole area. Tabia, just to bring you in, you have a different viewpoint. You're coming from the educational field. What do you see now with respect to AI usage, the gaps, and where is it going?
I mean, what I observe as someone who teaches research methods in AI programs at the University of Limerick is that AI is certainly becoming very prevalent in more areas than we can possibly imagine, you know, and I see that, I think that will happen also in the localization industry for a lot of application areas way beyond machine translation. I hope it will also be something where we are going to look a lot more at the ethics of it all, especially I'm interested in the ethics of access. So who can benefit from it and who is being excluded, and that is always a big topic when it comes to technology. We all know about the long tail languages and all that, and you know, we will be looking into, you know, this will be even more relevant the more we actually integrate AI. And I also believe that the education equation is very important, both when it comes to broad rollout of AI in our processes and everyday life. We all know the example when, you know, your friends get upset because they got blocked from a group for saying something they didn't think is offensive on Facebook, right? And you, as someone who understands language and a little bit about natural language processing, you totally know why the algorithm killed you, right? But I think we will see a lot more of that. But also for the access side of things, education will become more and more important there over the coming years, I believe.
That's an important one. Looking forward to getting into that a bit more with you, Tabi, as to, you know, what gaps exist, and as you have complicated solutions, are they easy to understand for users? Ken, you work at one of the original MT companies, if I can say that, at Sistran. What's your take on where things are at and where is it going?
So from a business perspective, AI is represented for me by the advancement in neural machine translation. I remember clearly back at the end of 2017, being amazed by the improvement between the neural engine and the original the previous statistical engine, and that quality also brought a level of initially an acceptance for machine translation overall. But what happened then was innovation. So, you know, we learned over, you know, the next year or so that, in fact, if you train the engine longer, even on the same data, it improved, which was the first sort of move forward. And then we start looking at, well, if we train it with different data, you can actually develop domain-specific engines. And, you know, that became quite important as people wanted, you know, I'm in life science, I'm in tourism, I'm in automotive, you know, how can I have it specifically specialized in my field? And that's when the business opportunity came about. And through our marketplace, what we have been able to do, and probably most commonly known, are the TED engines and the COVID engines. But the real business opportunities lay with small companies like a Turkish company called Dragoman, who I hope I'm pronouncing that correctly, by the way. My Turkish is very poor. But they produced a Turkish engine, which is much better than the generic Sistran engine. Similarly, Terminotics did one for Canadian French. And this business opportunity continues on today, where LSPs who have the ability to take data and use it to train engines now have the ability on an open market, because it's based on open source, to make it available to a very wide audience. Moving forward, I think certainly chat live, this conference, really, why does it matter what language I'm speaking? You should be able to understand me clearly, and I think that's one of the things that we'll see. I think education will change over time, and I also think blockchain will start to come into play, but more about that later.
Thanks, Ken. Lots to chew on there. So the audience is getting a flavor for what we're going to cover. Julio, you know what it takes to manage localization, right? And the whole marketing area for many, which is like the first part of the content engine. What's your take on AI at the moment?
Yeah, so obviously my fellow panelists are obviously the experts on AI applied on localization, and I'll be talking a little bit about how this AI is affecting global marketing, especially considering that more often than not, the localization departments within corporations are usually falling under the global marketing team. So from a marketing perspective, we are seeing a huge increase in more content and more tools, more quality. Basically, all the marketing teams are producing more content than ever. And more, this is actually translating into the localization business, seeing the no translation approach as a no option, given that companies are able now to produce content from an AI perspective. They are also expecting that content to be translated at the same cost. So obviously that will actually translate into more business for the translation industry, probably using AI in most cases. And as I will explain later on in the panel, we have a few examples. Just to give you an idea, the Washington Post has been using a software called Heliograph to be publishing content for the last years. And obviously they might not be high exposure content, but they are using this software to actually create small articles and not so high visible news. But at the same time, they are producing so much content that we will see a need for translate that content. So we will discuss that interaction between global marketing content and the AI on localization, how they both merge together.
So if there's no limit to being able to create the content, then is there a limit then to the amount of content? We're just going to see massive amounts of content become humongous. What's the next adjective we can use, right? Excellent, thanks, Julio. And let's look at the stakeholder perspective. So there's various stakeholders in the industry, many of them here at GALA. How are they currently viewing and acting on AI? What is the impact stack for them? Ken, do you want to talk about the corporate side view there?
Yeah, and strangely, the pandemic has heralded a big change with regard to who within the corporation is interested in automating the translation process. And what I've seen, certainly within the last year, is the CIO and that department becoming more involved. And the interesting part there is that their focus is very much more on security and the challenges around security, and with these new eyes that are on the translation process itself, they're concerned around their IP and how it may be compromised through the localization process. They were also, and I was very happy to see it, with the first to start asking for, give us all your languages, we want to communicate more. And again, it surprised me with how many, we do get these queries every now and then, but it was query after query after query. So a different set of eyes changes the game quite considerably. And equally, they were more open to looking at how you use MT as a tool to solve business problems. And part of this, and this is purely my own thought, is that they didn't come in, as a lot of the people on the call today, they would have been used to seeing statistical engines and even rules-based engines before that, and saw the quality issues, where these were new eyes coming in, seeing the quality being extremely good and going, hey, why aren't we using this more? And what they've started to do was push, say, okay, how can we do it here? How can we do it, you know, for this particular application? And have actually pushed back. And in fact, ourselves and yourselves, XTM, have been working on this near fuzzy adaptation, which was driven by the corporates who were saying, hang on a second, we have all these fuzzies. You know, why aren't we putting them as part of the translation process? An example of what it does is it will take something like I am going to the airport to catch a flight, and the what's being asked to translate is I'm going to the train station to catch a train, and by use of the NFA it knows, and the AI which has trained the engine in that regard. So again, corporates are pushing for specific things. Watermark is another example that we just launched literally a couple of days ago, where corporates were saying, hey, you know, we want to put it out there, but we want people to know, and I don't have to be having to type it in each time, so we put a watermark in. So they're much more in the driving seat than they have been in the past.
Right, so that they're seeing, you know, what the tech can do firsthand. They're able to get access to it, and therefore they want more. A bit like I have a 10-year-old who I tried to get to use a mouse on a laptop, and he just said no. He wants to touch the screen. What am I, you know, where am I coming from? So it's interesting. Thanks, Ken. To be back to the educational side of things. So, you know, what is the view from that you perceive within academia?
I mean, really, when we think about academia as a stakeholder in all this, we have the research equation and we have the education equation, right? And what I've observed is that when it comes to pure AI programs, you know, where someone just wants to do a master's in artificial intelligence or something, that is currently a very hot area. I mean, it's a very popular area to study, and a lot of universities are offering it. And certainly there's a great uptake in there. And we can also see that when it comes to AI research, for example, at the University of Limerick, there are some great initiatives and programs, and they have a lot of industry involvement, both in when it comes to collaborative research, where industry would provide data sets and sometimes funding or co-supervision, but also provide a lot of input into the way education is happening. What I see as a challenge, however, is that what I've now described are people who are doing computer science. I mean, these are usually students who, you know, have an undergraduate degree in software development or some other computer science area. But what we're looking at in localization, of course, we have people who do this as a, you know, as a career, who have you know, who have a degree in computer science and are developing machine translation engines or something like this. But we also have the equation where there is this huge element of interdisciplinarity. You know, a lot of people in the industry, of course, come from a non-computing background. They would be linguists or business background or something like that. And what I see as a challenge, where the academic area will have to be a stakeholder for the industry, and industry a stakeholder in academia, is how do we actually make this happen? How do we allow people with a non-computing background to still be informed users and actively participate in this AI field? And the analogy that I like to think of is, you know, there was a time where if you were driving a car, my father tells me when he had his first car and he had to fix it, he was able to actually fix it because he was reasonably skilled at doing so, and it was a pure mechanical job, right? today, if you try to fix your own car, you have a problem. It's not going to happen, right? Because it's such a highly skilled issue. And I think that the more we actually look at AI being part of our lives, the more we will have that challenge, and we need to find a way together to actually bridge that in terms of education in different ways, be that, you know, actual university programs or certifications or whatever it might be.
Excellent. I like the car idea. Do we need an AI scientist to fix our cars? If like me, you have an old car, hold on to it if you can, I guess is some advice, or
Yeah,
go with the flow.
You can still drive your car without knowing how it works, right? And that's the way a lot of systems work with AI, you know, under the hood. But you don't know why it's driving really, and if it's not working, then you have a bit of a problem all of a sudden. Yeah, you're stuck out on the roadside, and you need to call an expert, which is often a good answer. But you know, but sometimes you don't want that to happen. You want to actually be a very informed user.
Interesting. Very interesting. We see some questions coming in. We're going to take them probably towards the end, but please keep them coming in. Julio, you know, with marketing departments, you mentioned earlier, they're using AI tools to create content, right? Can you give a couple of examples of this?
Yep. So, yes, I was saying earlier, Dave, all marketing departments are now pushed into the AI arena, and they are using as many tools as possible to, you know, to benefit from the AI technology. And now more than ever, and this is just from my experience, the localization departments are also being pushed into the AI conversation. Maybe 10 years ago, 5 years ago, this topic was not on the table, but now you are actually having conversation from people not being actually fully related to localization, saying, hey, when are we going to start using machine translation? When is this technology going to be on board for the company and be able to benefit from us? So actually, this is actually quite shocking because, you know, 10 years ago, 5 years ago, no one would talk about that. And now, you know, machine translation and, you know, all these kind of technologies are no longer a nice to have for the marketing departments. So you see AI assisted authoring tools. That's also actually benefiting the translation workflow, because that's creating a lot of consistent content, and that's actually optimizing how the quality for the translations are going. Social media, you know, the use of social media by AI is also affecting how these social media interactions are going to be happening in other languages. How are we going to use that technology in order to be able to engage with non-English audience? So, and I'll give you an example. I don't know if you have the slide there, Dave, and you can share it. And this is actually something that, you know, marketing departments are using. You might be familiar with this or not, but actually, and this is from my experience, whenever you log into Netflix and you see you're scrolling and trying to figure out where you want to watch next, you might see different artwork for the same series or the same movies. And you might think that the artwork is based on demographics. Maybe, hey, we are using this artwork for Germany and this different artwork for Spain. But actually, the artwork for featuring all these different content items is actually based on your preferences. So Netflix will actually know if you're actually kind of you are watching a lot of scary movies or you are more into adventure movies. So based on your preferences, the artwork that they will use to feature any content will be based on those preferences. So AI is actually being used for marketing teams to actually create more customized content, and in the same way that would affect how that global marketing campaigns and that global marketing efforts are going to be translated into the localization department. So this is huge, and, you know, no localization department can stay away from the AI technology.
That's super interesting. So that Uber personalization is really trickling down. You know, as Ken mentioned earlier, there's a trickle down approach with the personalization. It's just happening. So we're going to see a lot more of this, a bit like what you were saying. you know, the consumer trends lead into business trends, lead into what happens in downstream processes. So this Netflix phenomenon will probably just roll into other things, right?
Yeah, exactly. And actually, I read one sentence, which is basically what will define marketing in the near future is everything for everyone, fully customized. And that's how the content is being created and how is the global audience expecting to see that content fully customized. So I will share some numbers later on in the conversation, but you will see that those marketing departments and localization departments that are not ready for this fully customized approach will lose customers, they will lose users and visitors. So they need to be on top of this technology for sure.
Very interesting. Maxime, let's bring you back into the conversation. You know, can you talk about adoption and the business strategy and really focus in on where are we in adoption with AI within the localization industry? Where is that going? And let's bring everyone through that.
Yeah, sure. There was a concept introduced by Geoffrey Moore in the 90s, right? So a while ago, in his great book, which is called Crossing the Chasm. And apparently it also applies to AI, right? So, and in my opinion, at least, I think that we basically have crossed this chasm. And now we are in the, more or less like in the plateau, right? Plateau of adoption, which poses a very different challenges to AI from the technology development perspective. So there are lots of things which actually didn't attract a lot of attention from the business, right? So, and one of them is related to exactly to the business strategy, to operationalization strategy for AI. So we have like a good saying in the AI community, so that it takes a week to develop a model and maybe a year to deploy it. That's maybe the biggest bottleneck which exists now in the AI business in general. And I'm not talking just about localization industry. I'm talking about business in general. And apparently, yes, this is kind of the problem which started to attract attention from investors as well, maybe 1 year ago, maybe a couple of years ago. Now we see there are a lot of like companies and the solutions which appear in different parts of the world, which basically are targeting customers, like marketing departments of the companies, as we discussed like a minute ago, on how to bring the models which data scientists can develop relatively quickly and to production, right? And this is something that it's kind of not easy. It takes talents, it takes hardware, it takes time, right? So, and that's exactly where I think the focus will be in the following year or two, right? So how to find a problem for this particular solution. And well, primarily because of this problem, so AI is still not a commodity, right? It's becoming easier and easier to adopt it. There are more and more toolkits which allow you to develop the models, to model pretty much anything that has data, right? And there's also automation happening in the modeling area. So there are some solutions which basically allow you to do it without data scientists involved. And the next step is exactly what they're saying. So how to operate them, right? So once you have the model, how to put it in production, how to enable it to add business value. And let me bring you another example. So of the problems that we were not talking about even a couple of years ago, it's the data shift, right? So imagine that you build a model, and this model tries to model the world as it is today, right? So whatever it is, it can be a translation process, it can be any other machine learning application. And then you put it in production and you are happy because it gives you, let's say, 95% performance, right? And then over time, you realize that actually the performance of this model starts degrading. It's not 95% anymore, it's 94, 93, 90. And then the good question, like, why it's happening? It's happening because your model is trying to model the world as it was a week ago, or months ago, or a year ago, right? So, and the world is changing, but your model is not. And that's actually why the model retrainings is something that actually you have to do to keep your models up to date. It's becoming so much attention these days. Retrainings is nothing more than just a solution, which is not maybe the smartest one, right? So first of all, you need to understand when this data shift starting to happen. Maybe you need a year, maybe you have a day, you don't know that, right? And also, like looking back at 2020 when we had COVID, so the world changed so quickly, then probably you had to like retrain your models like I don't know every hour maybe just to make sure that you adapt to the changing world. And yeah, I mean there are also like solutions appearing to try to solve this problem on the monitoring, alarming, and maybe solution automation sides. And all that actually is changing the way how we perceive the AI strategies in the company, right? It's not anymore about like this fancy stuff, which CEO of the company heard at the GALA conference, right? And he brings it back. Yeah, guys, let's start experimenting with it. It's now about like how to put it in production and start using it.
Very interesting. So we have a bit of a sour milk paradigm coming on that it can't, the data can be old in a couple of days to, you know, a couple of weeks. So you got to ensure you've got the latest stuff powering the learning engine, right?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, when I worked in one of my previous jobs, our client was Microsoft, and we were translating like some sort of content for Skype, right? And then apparently the machine translation system worked relatively well, and then suddenly what happened that they released a new version of Skype. And apparently the questions and the documentation and everything has changed as well, right? So that's a moment when you need to like really put all your focus on retraining your models, adopting them, and keeping them up to date to the changing environment.
So what is your AI depending on? Because that may change tomorrow and you need to shift that dependency or move it on to the evolved state.
Sure. It's in the end of the day, it's all about data, model, and code, right? So these three components.
Fantastic. And Ken, let's just talk about other challenges, you know, the whole area of trust and security in the system.
Yeah, it's quite interesting because I get asked that question, you know, 10 times a day, especially for our cloud product. You know, how secure, if I do translation in the cloud, how secure is it? And you know, it's as secure as sending anything else anywhere else. You know, it's encrypted and so on and so forth. And the trust element in that regard is quite interesting because it seems that the trust in relation to the quality is there, and but the trust on, you know, what happens to my translation, are you using it to train your engines and all this kind of stuff, which in fairness, as far as I'm aware, nobody does. You know, you have to have aligned TMs to do the training anyway. But on the corporate side, it's quite interesting and it's very different. And corporates, a lot of the corporates have blacklisted the free translation sites. And what's happened there is there's been quite large deployments among corporates, because, you know, in simple terms, if I need to translate something, I don't understand what's on the page. And if I don't understand what's on the page, how do I know if I'm giving away, whether it's something under GDPR rule or IP or whatever it happens to be? So corporates have a very different attitude. They are definitely worried about the from the access perspective and security and cyber security, all that kind of stuff. But they're more worried about what's on the page and how does that affect our customers within our various processes.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense, Ken. I think it's back to what you were saying earlier, the top-down approach. It's seeing what's in front of them in other worlds as well. Did I forget to run a poll? I think I did. Alison, can we run a quick poll here and just get the audience in on this conversation on challenges? So I think that looks great. So what are the biggest challenges to deploying and using AI in localization? What are your thoughts on this? Is it technology limitations, ethical, educational, data privacy, knowing when to deploy perhaps, or something else? Love to hear your thoughts. We give that a few seconds. So we're flying along here. And I'll ask Alison and the team, close that when you feel we have some good contributions in there. Oh, fantastic. So thank you very much for contributing. So technology limitations and data privacy and security. Does that ring any bells with anyone? Tabia, what are your thoughts on that?
Well, I selected data privacy and security myself, even though I'm in the educational sector. I mean, it's certainly a big issue, and I think it's a massive problem that we constantly give away data without understanding where we're giving it to, and we're using data we don't fully understand. I think it is running away with us, and we're probably looking at regulation in the long run, hopefully, because at some point it just becomes a problem that is too much to actually comprehend for the individual. So yeah, I would agree, even though it's maybe not obvious that I would.
And that gap between the complex solution from, you know, like NMT was a quantum leap sort of from statistical MT, but that education gap then grows and increases, doesn't it? And the more complex your solution, sometimes more complex the instruction manual.
Certainly. I mean, you have this issue when you look at, I mean, if I try to explain to someone in a lecture, you know, what does a rule-based machine translation, how does it work? You know, I can explain that to someone in a lecture. If I try to explain to someone what does neural machine translation look like, I can't do that in a lecture. You know, I need a semester at least, and if they don't have the mathematical background, they probably still won't understand it, right? So we have this. It's a well-known phenomenon that complexity is getting bigger in technology on all levels. And I mean, the audience, ask yourself, how often do you click on one of these little cookie pop-ups every day that say, are you sure you agree to these cookies, without even understanding what that actually means? I do this all the time, right? Because I really don't have the time or the headspace to do that. And that's fine for some things, and then for other things, it's not fine. And that's where I think we need to find a way to get on top of that.
So educating people, if you're on the service side of things, having good education programs can be essential when you're trying to explain the value of AI to customers potentially?
I think so, but I also think that I mean, yes, you want to inform your customer. I'm a big believer in that informed customers make better decisions, right? I mean, you have that problem when you try to sell quality to people, for example. They don't understand what quality means, right? They're not going to be happy to pay more for the quality you're trying to sell to them. I mean, we understand this intuitively, I think. But one of the problems that I think we have when you explain something to people is, do they actually understand is one question, but also, are they actually listening? And when we look at the use of data, you know, there is actual informed consent, and then there's the illusion of informed consent. And I think we're dealing a lot with the illusion of informed consent. So we have to find a way to actually find out whether people are listening when we're explaining things to them, and whether they are actually following along with us. So, and I think that is a challenge when you try to explain to your customers what it is that you're actually doing with their data, or with the processes that you're using, and what the limitations and challenges there are.
Fantastic. So what we might do is just give an opportunity during Q&A for more challenge questions to come up. But hey, let's get to the interesting stuff. You know, what will be the mature AI in 5 years' time, or between now and then, which is just a green shoot today? Julia, can I start with you on this one?
Sure. So yeah, as we discussed earlier, the future in content on localization is about everything for everyone, fully customized. And those companies that are not adopting this approach will be lost in the game. So I'll give you some numbers, some quick numbers. So I can read here for some research that 40% of consumers, for instance, are willing to change brands if they don't find the content that is personalized enough for their liking. So, or 43% are more likely to make purchases from companies that are fully customizing their content to their preferences. So it's all about, you know, customizing the content and making sure that it's fully targeted. That is affecting all types of marketing content, emails, chat box, which is, you know, the market for the chat box in the upcoming years is going to be huge. It's expected that around 50% of all engagements will be through chat box in the coming years. And for instance, I can give you two quick numbers. Voice marketing will, according to some research, will represent 30% of all internet searches in the near future. So basically, we are just approaching a landscape in which those organizations and those companies which are not fully targeting their customers and the content will not be longer in the game. So that's how I see the AI market, both for localization and both for the content industry, heading in the next 4 or 5 years.
You found some interesting statistics as well, right?
Yep. So that's how, those are the revenues that are expected in the from 2018 to 2025. So as you can see, the market is growing, and by 2025, we are expecting $126 billion in the software market. So that's huge. We were having some conversation that could be too optimistic, but what we clearly see here is an upward trend in the market. And so obviously there is business there, and there are a lot of money to make in the AI arena.
Thank you very much, Julio. And Ken, in terms of what are we going to see in 5 years, can you look into your crystal ball for us?
I will indeed. Just to actually refer back to Julio's piece there, back in the start of this century, I was in Bound Global Solutions. Some of you may remember me from there, and we started a project called Talking to an Audience of One, and we stopped it after 6 months because it was taking the time up of 50 people to just get that moving. And I think this is one of the areas that as Julius correctly stated, it's going to make a huge change where it's been automated. But from my perspective, I think there's a few areas. Firstly, I think, as I said earlier, chat, and there's a number of projects underway, and the ability to have a conversation with somebody and not be concerned with what language they're speaking. And I think within 5 years, I firmly believe that will be there. I think the nature of education, specifically when it comes to prospects, customers, and staff, will change. I think we're already seeing video being used far more often today than ever before. I started reading a book the other day, a self-help book, gifted to me by my wife, I might add. And the first paragraph, the guy was referring to this is a quick starter guide, and I got the idea because nobody ever reads the manual anymore. They only go to the video. And I thought it was amazing that it was literally the first paragraph of the book, but it's true. So technologies like hub captioning are becoming more and more popular, so making it available. And I think there's a company that I was talking to recently in the UK, and they are doing this synthesization of video. So not only will the translation take place, but the words will come out and the mouth will move at the same pace, and that's got all kind of ethical issues around it, and a topic in itself. But one of the bigger issues, or the bigger areas that I've seen, specifically when talking to a lot of corporations, is their concern around this concept of IP, and not knowing who the person at the end of the chain is, who is doing the translation. And one of the areas that I've been researching, and I think is a really good fit, is the whole area of blockchain, which is beginning to turn mainstream at this stage. Some of you may be familiar with Jack Dorsey, who's the CEO of Twitter. This was a sale of his first tweet for 2.9 million, and he actually gave it all to charity. But the interesting thing about this is the underlying blockchain technology is a thing called an NFT, or a non-fungible token, which, if anybody can translate that, please put it in the chat, because I'd love to know what fungible is in many different languages. But the purpose of the fungible token is that you have the the person who created the whatever it happens to be, the piece of content, the person that owns it, and the value all connected together. And what that means is that over time, if it's resold, Jack in that particular case, or here's another example of it, which was a piece of digital art that sold for 69 million, the originator still gets paid moving forward, which, you know, if we start thinking of that in terms of the localization process, and specifically with corporations who, as I say, the CIOs are looking at things slightly different, and they're saying, how can I use my AI technology at the beginning and, you know, maximize that part of it and involve the human in the loop at the end and not worry about it. And to me, blockchain technology is perfect for that, where you can actually connect the originator, who is the corporation who owns the IP, with the translator, and then the value, which is the content in the middle. So I see certainly within 5 years' time, and you know, one of the benefits of this technology is it is open source, so it will be up to individuals and companies to come together and build this. But for people to come together and say, okay, I now have the ability to translate that time and time again and get the reward. So the translator gets the reward for having done it and continually is in an ownership loop, and the corporation knows who the end user is, and so on and so forth.
Very interesting, and kind of, you know, from where you sit on the west coast of the States, you're seeing it in real world sense that the inflection point is starting to happen for corporates, and the trickle down effect will happen, as you said. Nice comment in here from Jim, the paper trail without the paper. Thanks, Jim. Good to see you.
And it's also
hey,
extended into music as well. You know, Kings of Leon just released their latest album in the same way. And Tony Hawk, the famous skater from San Diego, did his famous Ollie 540, which I know we all know what that is, and is selling it via an NFT. So that mainstream is something that will promote it even further.
Something for the skaters. Nice one, Ken. Tavia, what's your view on all this?
You see, we had actually a few mentions already of chatbots, which I think is one of the areas that we are very, you know, we are exposed more and more to AI. But I think in addition to that, we also have, you know, apart from the engagement with customers and so on, we have two more areas that we can be looking at for the next 5 years. And one of them is automation of business process, and the other is gaining insight through data analysis. And I am especially interested in the question of how can we free up more human brain power to do a lot more interesting things, right? And that is, I don't know if you want to show maybe the image that I have of the FITS. So basically, this is an image that shows a concept by Paul Morris Fitts. It's very old. He came up with that in the 1950s, I believe, and it's a little bit outdated. But what I like about it is that it shows a very clear distinction between what humans are best at and what machines are best at. And I think if we think in these terms, and we would have to update this for, you know, for the AI world, what it shows us, however, is that there are things that machines have always been better at than humans, or for a very long time anyway, and that has anything to do with repetitive things, routine things, and so on. And if we think, for example, I used to be a project manager in localization, and there is a lot of repetitive work in there, right? If anyone has ever tried to, for example, things like, you know, onboarding translators, you know, getting them to sign the NDAs and filling in the forms and all these things, you know, if we were to bring AI technology into that process, or even just, you know, getting information out of emails and setting that up in systems for projects, you know, so these kind of processes where we can actually then say, okay, what what of that can we usefully allow artificial intelligence to take on, and thereby free up the creative energy of the staff in the company to do things that actually add a lot more value to the company. Not to say that it's not adding to the company right now, but it could be adding additional things. They could be finding new customers or something like that as well. But I also think that what is an interesting part in there is that when we think about AI integration in these kind of processes, we don't have to think about it in a binary way, right? We don't have to say it's either on or off. We can also think about, does the AI technology make autonomous decisions, for example, or does it only make suggestions to a human, right? Is it helping the human and supporting in the work, or does it actually go all the way and make it fully automated? And what I see happening in the coming years is that we collectively will get a lot smarter about this, and we will think very hard about what kind of things we really don't like doing every day at our job, and which of the things we actually would like to be doing a whole lot more, and finding ways to automate this in a lot more intelligent way than we currently are.
Thank you very much, Toby. Yeah, I like that. Implementation of AI is not a binary thing. Well, you heard it here, folks. Nice one, thanks, Toby. And Maxime, 5 years' time, what can we expect? Technology enhanced? What are we going to see?
Yeah, we don't have much time, unfortunately, so I'll try to be quick. I think there are four main areas, which will change, right? Maybe not even in 5 years, maybe in 2 years, given the current speed of AI adoption. So first one is the data, right? It's the most obvious point is that, and I think that actually the data will grow in three ways, right? So first one is availability, right? There will be more and more data in the world. I mean, it's kind of a very obvious thing. Another one is diversity of data. And if we talk about machine translation, for example, right? So it means that we will have data for more domains, for more languages, more language combinations, etc. And the third one is the bias in data, right? So, I mean, if you look at the data which is used to train our current models these days, I mean, if you look at it carefully, you will immediately see that in some cases it's kind of biased and it hurts the end application. So, for example, if you train your models on the data coming from, let's say, clean and very neat optimized environment, and then you put your model and ask it to face the real world, right? To deal with the real world problems, probably it wouldn't be able to do a great job simply because it's not ready for that. So that's one. Another one is, I think we discussed it earlier, so adoption, right? So the speed of adoption, time to market for AI, I'm sure will dramatically decrease in the following year or two, given the availability and attention to this topic from the engineering community, from investors, from research as well. Yeah. So, and finally, the models themselves, right? So I think that actually the way how we perceive machine learning is changing already. So instead of like isolated models, which would train for a particular use case, for a particular like language combination, right? We are moving slowly to the world where we have like a one huge model, and then if we want to like adapt like a new use case or new language combination, we just make a little tweak to this like big model, right? And apparently you have your solution in a much easier and actually much faster way. So yeah, and the last remark, I would say, I think that we are moving also towards a better understanding and acceptance of AI generally, right? So if we are talking about like localization industry, so converting translators to post editors, it's been like a very long process that I remember when I just joined the industry, it was like 15 years ago, was already like somehow on the table of many companies, and it's still we see like educational training acceptance gap, which I think that we will do all our best to close, right, in the following years. I have much more to say, but I think that we don't have.
Your time is against us as always on these. Thank you very much, Maxime. More data, more diversity of that data, and the bias of data moving on. I mean, AI is here to stay, right? We've been getting questions in from you all. Let's take them now. And I've been told by our wonderful host, Maria Jesus, we may be able to squeeze another 5 minutes here. So if you're willing to stay with us, we'll do that. First question, Catherine comes in. Great panel, thanks very much, Catherine. With more and more content being created and therefore more and more need for AI-powered translation, do you also see a need for AI-assisted content curation strategies? That's a mouthful. Who wants to jump in on that? So content curation strategies.
I would say it's already happening, isn't it? I mean, what you see on your Facebook feed every day has been curated for you, right? And we also know already that there are opportunities and challenges in there. And I would say an opportunity in here would be for companies to use this, for example, for content prioritization, so they can actually make a decision what is going to be machine translated with or without post editing, or human translated or whatever. So I think it's here and it will probably get more.
Thanks, Tadia. Anyone else want to add anything?
If I may add, so it's not so much on the application side, it's more on the importance of data curation for LSPs, right? So I believe that the key component of the quality of machine translation systems, if we're talking about machine translation here, is basically the quality of data, right? So that's why the well-curated, well-labeled TMs in big volumes. So that's actually the main component of high quality machine translation systems. That's why it should be strategically important for all the players, even if they don't use them like actively in-house machine translation right now.
Thanks very much, Maxime, for that. Let's take a second question. So Frederick is asking, thanks again, panelists, what can or should LSPs, language service providers, be doing to adapt and thrive in this environment? Who's going to raise their hand here?
I'll have a go at that. I think in general, it's important to embrace the technology that's there today. And there's, one of the things that I discovered was that when people talk about AI, they talk about a thing, but it's how you use that thing, whatever it happens to be, is more important than anything else. And there are so many tools out today, and machine translation is one of them, but there are lots of other AI powered tools. And what makes common sense from a business perspective is the way to approach it. It should be just seen as just another tool to to make more profit effectively. Maybe I've just been in the US too long, but that's what companies exist for.
Right, so it's a mechanism, a tool. Find out what the latest thing is, do your research, get educated, which is the point that's come up repeatedly here, and get as far ahead of the curve in your niche as you can.
Yeah, definitely. And we also use marketing tools internally that are pretty amazing with the things that they do. Totally nothing to do with localization, but again, it's about reviewing what they can do and then what is the ROI in any normal sense of the way you would evaluate, but don't see it as a see it what it does and not what it is, would be my advice.
Thanks, Ken. And thanks to Frederick for that, and Catherine for the previous question. We have another question from Alan. One issue that I've not heard treated in this fascinating panel, thank you, Alan, is which applications of AI require actual understanding of the text that is processed, and whether current AI systems understand language or only manipulate words mechanically. What do the panelists think? Maxime, do you have a thought on that?
Yes, sure. I mean, it comes to the classic concept of interlingua, right? So whether you can create or imagine a language which would represent all languages independently on which words are used in those languages, right? Or writing systems, whatever. So, and I think that actually we are pretty much living in the basic interlingual world these days. I mean, neural machine translation, which, yeah, I mean, we didn't dare to explain in this panel, apparently do exactly that. I mean, in a very simplified way, but they represent the semantic meaning of the words and then help you to manipulate with it. I mean, whoever was using like machine translation in the recent years, which was obviously neural, would notice that in some cases the AI like rewrites phrases, right? So it doesn't just translate word by word or phrase by phrase as it was even like 5 years ago, but it tries to basically rewrite it. It does a paraphrasing. Sometimes it does mistakes, of course. But to me, I mean, it's not coming to the full understanding in the way how we humans understand texts, right? But it comes to semantic representation and pretty complex semantic representation of more than one language. So yeah, that's my view on that.
Thank you, Maxime. I hope that's answered the question. We'll take one more question. I see it in here, an interesting one. So advice time again. What training and courses do you advise us to take to get up to speed with AI and automation when it's become more than a decade? Then maybe some of us were at university, maybe a bit longer for others. What's your advice there?
I think the first question that I would clarify for myself is, what do I actually want to know, need to know? And that is quite hard to do without actually having some overview of the field, I believe, right? So what I would be doing in that situation is going to, you know, there are those MOOC platforms like Coursera, for example. Just go and sample a few of the courses there to figure out what it actually is that you're looking for, right? You could also, if you're interested specifically in machine translation, Philip Kuhn, who wrote a good while ago, he wrote a book on statistical machine translation and recently released a book on neural machine translation. He also has on his YouTube channel an entire series on machine translation, including neural machine translation. So, you know, I would suggest having a look at this kind of free content and determining from that where you are going after that, because it really gets quite detailed and complex quite fast.
Thank you, Tabea. Speaking of things getting complicated quite fast, of course, I didn't hit the unmute button. So it's so look, we hope we've answered questions that you had top of mind. But I would suggest, if you have further questions, put them into the GALA channels later, and we'll find a way to get them answered for you. I'd just like to, you know, last word from each of the panelists. You know, what's the magic we'll be discussing in 5 years' time on this very stage? Hopefully, you know, some nicer location perhaps, or maybe you're at a nice location, but somewhere where we're all together. What's the magical AI localization we're going to be seeing right then or using? Julio?
Well, I don't know about localization itself, but what we have seen at the whole GALA conference in the past 2-3 years is, in the last 2-3 days, is that AI is here to stay, and in 4 or 5 years, maybe it might not actually be a topic anymore because it's so much part of our lives that we will just get used to it. So I will see the magic will be more probably around virtual reality, augmented reality, also about voice. So all these new technologies that are at the earliest stages that will just, you know, merge with AI. And I think that we are just at, you know, at the very earliest stages of these technologies, and what comes ahead is going to be pretty amazing, both for the localization industry and for our day-to-day lives.
Thanks, Julio. Tabea, final words on magical moments we're going to see then?
I think in 5 years' time we will all have to take stock and see whether we're right. You know, that's going to be the big challenge, because we can crystal ball a lot and then just see what happens.
Excellent, thank you. Maxime, what are your final thoughts?
I don't want to open a Pandora box, but I think we're going to be talking about multilingual natural language generation. I think that, yeah, translation will become like only one of the technologies to generate text in multiple languages.
Excellent. Let's put a silence around the room. And Ken, what are your thoughts?
But I don't think it'll be Ken, it'll be KenBot. And
KenBot.
he'll be far better looking and far more intelligent and much better equipped to answer questions.
On that happy note, we'll thank KenBot, or Ken, we're not sure now. And actually, there's one last question I'm going to try. Will Marie Jesus kill me? She might. What's your take on establishing the balance between language agnostic versus multilingual applied machine learning and AI systems to optimize performance across the globe? That's a good mouthful. So the balance between language agnostic, multilingual, applied machine learning. Any takers? We might take that one offline, Talia, and I'll get back to you on that and let other people know. So without further ado, I'd just like to thank our panelists, KenBot, Maxime, Tabia, and Julio. Thank you all for listening, and Maria Jesus, thank you.
Thank you, Dave. I was afraid you were going to ask me that last question because I wouldn't know what to say. Thank you, Dave, Ken, Julio, Maxime, and Tabea. It's been fascinating, and I know we could talk for another 10 hours about this. So as Dave said, let's continue, the conversation through the many channels. At GALA, there's one thing that has stuck with me, and you're going to laugh, this sour milk paradigm when talking about data being on within a couple of days. So that'll be my thought now for the next couple of days. So guys, thank you for staying on the extra few minutes. I know we would love to have another GALA next week, as somebody put in the chat earlier, but we have to wrap up.